ago was identify who you want to work with, because you could have virtual events. If you and I are honest, it's something that it seems like it could fit anybody. Coaches can do it, digital course creators can do it, all these people can do it, but who do you really want to work with? Who's using it the most? Identifying and honing in on your niche. Because the thing is, what's the worst thing that could happen if you niche in too far is you just go up market. Like you just up market. Because for us, when we started, we actually niched in too far and we weren't finding as many people as we needed to. So we had to go up market. And so for me, is the one piece of advice I would give people is identifying your ideal client.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Stephen Pemberton. And Stephen started out of high school and got married, had a son, started a MLM, multi-level marketing business with his wife. I think lost everything with the business at one point at 21, and then went to work in the corporate world after about 6 years, and then left that to pursue a business again, and joined his wife's Amazon business. The Amazon store ended up getting shut down because of supplier issues. Started to live off savings, pivoted the business to do more of Shopify, as well as I think Facebook and Google advertising, built the business back up, pivoted again to do some virtual events, which is part of what he's doing now. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Stephen.
Thank you so much. You did a great job of encapsulating the journey. We can pretty much end it right there and have a great day. No, I'm just
All
playing.
right. Well, that will make for a very quick episode, but no, why don't so I just took a much longer journey and or encapsulated into the 30-second version of it. But why don't we rewind a little bit and tell us a little bit about coming out of high school, getting married, having your son, and entering the working world.
So that is a very interesting story because there was some, let's say, immature decisions that I was making at that time. And that's when we found out that our son was going to be coming into the world. That's when we decided that we were going to get married. We were already engaged, but we weren't planning to get married that fast. And then once we found out, hey, we got a kid on the way, that's when we decided, let's go ahead, get married. And then once we got married, and then 6 months later, our son came along, my wife came to me and she said, hey, I don't want to go back to work. And I said, that's great, but I'm making $13 an hour. So we had to figure something out. And so that's when she got into the MLM.
So you get into the MLM, and that's multi-level marketing. I would say if it's the colloquial term, which is a less favorable term, which people say is pyramid scheme.
Pyramid scheme, yeah.
You'll sometimes see it for whether it's some health and wellness products or diet products or other things, and some of them are great. I'm not putting down other ones have got bad reputations, but you get in there, started that out. And then I think you mentioned you lost a lot of things doing that business as you guys kind of progressed through it and had to go a different direction. Is that about right?
Yes. So when we started the MLM, my wife did it first. She was doing it from home. I watched her grow an Instagram following from 0 to 10,000 in about 2 months, organically, just working all day on content and different things. And I watched her be able to start bringing home $500 a month. And at the time, I had never seen anyone do that. So I was blown away, and I asked her, I was like, you can actually make money from home just by posting stuff and people want to buy things. And that's when I said, hey, you know what's better than you doing it by yourself is let me come home too, and we'll do this together. And at that time we had $500 for our name, and rent was $750 the next month. And I didn't have any skills that actually benefited the business. So we ended up in short order losing everything and having to move into a basement.
So now and I think that, that's been my experience with a lot of MLMs is you start out, you build a bit of it, you go through all your friends, family connections and then it tends to be difficult. Not everybody, some people I know have done a great job, but a lot of times it gets difficult to continue on that business. So you guys, sounds like that was a bit more of your experience. And so, went down that route, lost quite a bit, moved into the basement. And so where did you guys kind of pick up from there? Or how did you decide what you're going to do to rebuild things?
Well, in that time and place, that was when I got my first taste of real depression. I remember being in this basement. My wife she would go upstairs and hang out with the family that took us in, and so you could actually see the sun up there. But in the basement, there was no windows, so I just stayed down there in the dark always because I felt worthless. I felt like I'd failed my entire family, and the number one thing that I thought had failed in that time was not only me but the business itself, like the structure. And of course, we can get into nitpicking about it. There's some definite training issues that we ran into, but there was a lot of responsibility I had to take. And that's what I learned further down the road. What really got me out of bed was we had to still pay rent to these people because they couldn't afford to have us. So I was doing odd jobs. I was working part time at basically a rental company where they rented out equipment. I would work part time there. And then eventually I ended up getting another part-time position at the post office. So I was doing things to just put food on the table. And
Mm.
even with putting food on the table, it was not really I still had this complex of not feeling worth it, like not feeling worthy of the situation. So my mom gave me this box of the Nature Valley Crunch bars, the ones that are super messy when you open them. And that was my lunch and my dinner because I refused to go upstairs and eat dinner with the other family because they were the ones paying for the food. So I felt like I have to just eat with what I got. And it was a box of the family size Nature Valley Crunch bars. And then eventually I came home one day from a post office route. That was a mail carrier. And I walk in and my wife is in the bed and she's on her laptop and she says, "Hey, I applied you for this corporate position. And I feel like you're going to get it." And for me, I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So growing up in the South, I was always told to get a good job, you either had to have a college education or you had to know somebody. And I had neither of those for this role. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll go to the interview. And I went to the interview. I ended up getting that job, but little did I know that that was going to be the hardest job, the hardest thing really I've ever done. With being in that warehouse and being in that space, working anywhere from 16 to 21 hours when I first started, and it being backbreaking labor in a environment that was not it was not climate controlled. So there was no heat, no air. It was extremely hot, extremely daunting. The space did breed something that I had been locked away inside of me for a long time, which was being able to actually access that when your brain says you can't do anymore, you really can push past that. There's so much more that you can access.
Makes sense. So now you get into that, and I said sometimes you take jobs and positions because got to make ends meet, got to make rent, got to pay for life, and nothing comes in this world for free, which is probably a good thing. And so you get you start doing that some of that, in your own words, kind of backbreaking labor, and kind of get down to that. Now I assume again putting words in your mouth that wasn't the end goal, or that wasn't or where you wanted to be for the rest of your life. And so I think that, if I remember right, your wife had started another business on Amazon, and you kind of or eventually transitioned over to working with her on that, and kind of took that direction of your journey. Is that right? Or walk us through that a bit.
Yeah, so that is correct. And that was about 4 years into the corporate journey, into this warehouse journey. So going back to me getting that role, in the beginning I hated it. For the first 3 4 months, I hated it every single day. But even something that you said, it's like I had to do it. I felt like it was something I owed to my family. I had to do it. I had to put food on the table. I had to pay rent. So even though I hated it, I showed up every day. And eventually what I saw was that through my hard work, one of my managers, he came to me and he said, "Hey, you can move up in this company, right?" And I said, "No, I can't. I don't have a college education, so I know I can't be a manager." And he said, "It doesn't matter." He said, "I don't either." And that moment that I realized I could be more than just a entry level employee, that's when I started working my tail off and I would come in early, I would stay late, I would learn from everyone. The one individual that I learned the most from, he cussed me out every single day for a month and a half because he did not want to teach me anything because he thought I was trying to take his job. And then once I explained to him that I did want to move up, but I wanted to move out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, that's when he opened up and finally started teaching me. And as I progressed up the ladder in the corporate ladder per se, that's when in 2018, that's when my wife ends up starting this Amazon business after I told her blatantly don't. because I still years later, we're 4 years past losing everything.
Mm.
I felt so jaded towards that MLM. I never wanted to be back in business. I just wanted to get to where I was making $100,000 a year. That was the dream. I wanted to make $100,000 a year and be comfortable and be in a place I enjoyed. So her doing that, I thought was putting everything in jeopardy. So I told her no, and she was bullheaded enough to do it anyways. And I was able to watch her take a business from zero, from being a person who would cry anytime she would get bad feedback, to taking it by the end of 2019 to $1 million of top line revenue.
No, that's awesome. And sometimes I think with entrepreneurship and doing your own business, you have to just simply say, "Hey, I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I'm going to do it anyway, no matter what people tell me, and I'm going to persevere." And so it sounds like your wife had that, that perspective, which benefited you in the long run. Yet I also get the, hey, as we go along our journey, we have scars, we have things that that tend to or give us different perspectives on how we approach things, and so you guys are kind of battling that a bit back and forth. And so now as you're doing that, so your wife puts in a lot of work and effort and gets or some a great top line revenue with the business. And I think at some point you mentioned that you decided to jump over from the corporate job to work with your wife on the business full time.
Yes. So at the end of 2019, as I mentioned a minute ago, the business did $1 million in top line sales, but the margins were 10%. So the margins were trash. And we had a partner. So you split that two ways. Plus, we had to put some money back into the business for cash reserves. So I was making more working in corporate, easy. I didn't have to, I just went and I clocked in, I clocked out whenever the work was done. I didn't have to have 6 employees and do almost 19,000 transactions and worry about the taxes and everything else. I could just go to work. But one thing I realized was that my skill sets being in corporate were in logistics and the supply chain and in team building. So those were the issues that they had. And so a few months into it, we went to a business conference right before COVID shut everything down. And I was able to start getting business skills that were applicable to the business. And then in May of 2020, there were some life situations happening. I started having some anxiety attacks for the first time in my life. And that propelled me in June to make that decision, to make that leap, to leave the job, right? The cushy position, the 5.5 years of doing it, to go into business. And that's where, even as you said, that's where we transitioned into a few months later, Amazon shutting us down, all because of one mistake, one issue with the supplier. But it ended up being the most beautiful thing that could have happened because we were able to pivot into a whole, not a whole different business, but a whole different platform that was much more, that was
Mm.
much more able and suited for us to be able to grow.
No, and I think sometimes it's those painful things. You have a business, you set it up a given way, and it's going well, and then things outside of your control force you to pivot and adjust. And while it's painful at the time, it ends up presenting a better opportunity and forces you out of the comfort zone, which is kind of sounds like where you guys ended up was, hey, this isn't something that we wanted or that we asked for, but don't really have a choice. And so now what was that kind of, how did you go about pivoting or adjusting or otherwise, taking the business? Because I think you mentioned it was kind of with some supplier issues and
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, didn't like it or cracked down or whatever it was that they pulled back on. And so you're saying, hey, we have to adjust and pivot. So kind of just walk us through a bit of what that was.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the supplier, the big issue that happened with that supplier was that we were looking at this individual. They were also selling on Amazon. They've been selling on Amazon for years, and they had the nice house, they had the nice car. And we thought, well, if they're selling this same stuff, then if we buy it from them, they should have all the paperwork, right?
Mm.
No, they didn't. And we didn't realize that because we got an invoice, which is what you need to be able to get ungated, is what they call it on Amazon. So we had everything that looked like the correct paperwork. But what ended up happening is because we had a lot of products in there, inside one of those lots was a brand that was the only brand, like the only person selling it on that listing. So then we got an IP complaint. And then once we got that IP complaint, that's when everything went downhill for Amazon. And on that end, with Amazon, when they shut you down, they hold your money forever and ever and ever. And that was about $58,000. Plus, we had about another 35,000 sitting in the garage. So close to 100K that was tied up into that Amazon business. And the way that we pivoted was actually, I love this story because we had tried everything. We tried liquidation, we tried anything and everything that we could. We tried doing yard sales, we tried everything to just get rid of this inventory. And one day my wife is scrolling Facebook and she just sees how a product is posted on Facebook Marketplace. And this was when Facebook Marketplace had just opened up shipping. So at the
Mhm.
time, it was basically a nicer looking Craigslist until they added shipping. And once they added shipping, we had the skill sets off of Amazon. We had the inventory. So we just started listing the stuff on Facebook Marketplace. And that's when we saw where we went from 0 to 5K profit in the first month. And then from 5K profit to being able to help 3,300 underprivileged kids by the end of 2020, making $100,000 a month in 6 months, more than I ever made working in corporate. And then by the end of 2021, making $1 million again, top line. And then being able to help 137 underprivileged kids have Christmas through either raising or donating about $40,000, $50,000, finding all the kids in the school system in Tennessee and in the backwoods of Tennessee, buying all the presents, wrapping them all, and delivering them all. So we were Santa and his elves. But that's kind of the pivot, if you wanted to say that.
No, makes perfect sense. Sounds like it's a good pivot. So now you guys make that pivot and you figure out, okay, didn't work out with Amazon. That's not the place that we can continue the business that's set up, and we'll do the yard sales, do the things that we have to do to get by, and then or pivot over to doing the marketplace, getting in. I think you mentioned getting onto Shopify, getting into some advertising and that. So walk us through a little bit, kind of now over that evolution as you made the pivot. Kind of where is the business today, and how are things going?
So with the business now, with the e-commerce, in 2022, we actually pivoted away from it. In March of 2022, we actually made the decision to go fully into the done for you virtual event space where we build out the infrastructure for our clients to put on their virtual events. And the reason you may be hearing the story and think that's crazy, why would you do that? But the reason why we decided to make that jump was in December of 2021, we were already doing masterminds for ourselves. We were doing virtual events for ourselves. And the impact that we were able to make, and honestly, in practicality, the margins were much better, that it made sense for us to be able to make that transition over into the virtual event space. Because yes, money's great and we're able to make an impact with the money, but we're also able to make an impact in our everyday with our clients. We find the right clients that are already helping people and we just expand their reach. And with that being said, the way the business is going today, it's been a journey because it's way different. It's way different than direct to consumer. Being more B2B, it's much different to sit there and work with businesses having to be face to face. And actually, the fulfillment side is much different than just typing some stuff out on your computer and then getting sales and then fulfilling them. So it's been a transition, but it's been a beautiful one.
Well, that's awesome. No, it sounds like it's been a fun journey, and figuring things out along the way, pivoting, adjusting, as all good businesses do as you continue to evolve. So, well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey, and even in how things have gone, great time to transition to the two questions always asked at the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Oh, that's easy. So the MLM was the worst business decision I ever made. And what I learned from it was I apply this in all business when I talk to business owners, especially startups, is you have to have the skill sets no matter what business you want to get into. So having an understanding of, and two things is one, the skill sets. So for me with logistics, being a logistics manager did not serve me in virtual events. So virtual events, I had to build those skill sets before we transitioned over. Two is understanding who you even want to reach with it. Because with the biggest trap that I fell into with the MLM, and to be honest, I fell into in the beginning of the virtual events business was, well, I see people doing virtual events or I see people doing healthcare products all the time. Everyone can use this. And so I fell into the trap that I'm going to reach everyone instead of actually honing it into who can I help the most? Who is actually looking for this? Who is actually using it the most? And those are the two biggest things that I like to apply across business in general.
No, definitely makes sense. And getting into MLM and losing everything definitely would qualify as a bad business mistake. But it sounds like a great one that you learn from and you're able to incorporate or improve on as you went forward. So now the second question I'll ask is, now if you talk to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
So exactly what I said a second ago was identify who you want to work with. because you could have virtual events, if you and I are honest, is something that it seems like it could fit anybody. Coaches can do it, digital course creators can do it, all these people can do it, but who do you really want to work with? Who's using it the most? Identifying and honing in on your niche. Because the thing is, what's the worst thing that could happen if you niche in too far is you just go up market. Like you just up market. Because for us, when we started, we actually niched in too far and we weren't finding as many people as we needed to. So we had to go up market. And so for me, is the one piece of advice I would give people is identifying your ideal client.
No, I think that that's definitely a great piece of advice. And I think, figuring that out, sounds great as a piece of advice, and it is, and yet figuring that out takes time, money, work, and effort.
Yes.
Because just because to say, oh, and I think a lot of times people trick themselves. Well, I'm my ideal market or client, or I know, they're just me, that type of thing. And probably a portion maybe or like you or maybe you, but it doesn't mean that everybody is, just because you may be one of the ideal clients or you may know some about the industry doesn't mean that that's the only thing. So I think that figuring out that right scope and that right client can be certainly impactful in the business.
Yeah, I think with that, especially with that, this is where having conversations is a big deal. So even before you build your product, even before you launch your business, if you have an idea, is just go talk to people. Actually go talk to who you think may be your ideal client. If you believe that you're your ideal client, go find more people like you and ask them, hey, I'm thinking about building this business. I'm thinking about doing this thing. Is this something that makes sense to you? Is this something that you would want? Is this something that solves a problem? Because the thing is, and you tell them, hey, be as honest and transparent with me as possible. If they'll tell you what'll work, what won't work, and then you're able to actually build a product catered to the people who want it instead of you just building something that you think everyone wants. So takes, like you said, time, money, and effort to be able to make those reach outs, to be able to establish those connections and ask those real conversations.
Absolutely. So perfect. Well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
So StephenPemberton.com is the best way because on there it's got all of the information that you need to learn more about me, more about the company, and that's also where all my social medias are. And I have my calendar straight on there. So if anyone wants to, it's free, like a free consultation call right there. It is with me, it's not with my top sales guy, but that's all on StephenPemberton.com.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Stephen, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Stephen, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much, Devin. Thank you for having me.